Welcome, fantasy managers. This is Devo 1099 with fantasy football backers heading into Premier League Game Week 33. We've got a bit of a shortened week. There's a few FA Cup matches that are going to be replacing the Arsenals and Aston Villas and Liverpools of the world. But we still have 7 matches. Some fairly interesting ones. Definitely a little more complicated of a game week than we typically see. Much of that driven by Manchester City, and it's hard to really know exactly what we're going to get from them on defense. But we'll get to that here shortly. Mondogoal still has their 30K qualifier. Few weeks left to get your ticket into that final in May. It's going to be pretty cool. It's going to be the biggest payout I think we've seen in the UK and in daily fantasy sports. And somebody's going to take home £10,000, I believe, is the winner, maybe £15,000. Either way, you're going to be pretty happy. I've got a couple tickets to that. I'd like to get a couple more. I know our colleague here, Mizungo, also has one. So we'll be there. We'll be there in the final. We don't have as many as Big O has, but we'll get there. Starting out, we're going to go with keeper, and we'll get right to that Manchester City issue. They've got West Ham coming to the Etihad. Joe Hart obviously didn't play particularly well against United. That was really tough for the City defense. Now we're looking at Company missing out. Mangala is a pretty dreadful replacement for him. So you've got Di Michelis and probably Mangala in the middle. It's not ideal. But West Ham has been so poor in their attack that I think I'm probably willing to risk Joe Hart and the City defenders. Hart's only £6.9 million. That's pretty reasonable. A couple other options though. You've got Kelvin Davis, $7.3 million. He is away at Stoke. Southampton is still one of the better defenses out there. They've given up a fair amount of shots lately, which was a little bit surprising to see, but they're not really letting many goals in. They've only allowed 1 goal in the past 3 matches. So, and that's with Kelvin Davis in net. So he's $7.3 million. I think he's probably maybe a little safer than Hart, but odds makers have Hart as more likely to keep a clean sheet. So, if you want to trust them, I wouldn't stop you. I'm probably would lean towards Davis myself, but I would play Hart in a heartbeat. Next, I've got Timmy Howard from Everton. Everton is sort of settled into where we thought they'd be all season long. They're still not a great team. We didn't really expect them to be a great team, but they weren't nearly as bad as they started out. Howard's been playing pretty well. He does tend to get himself out of position. He's getting a little bit older. He doesn't have the same reflexes he once did. So his good matches are still great, but he can let up a goal or two. And but Jagielka and Stones at center back are really solid. So when you have a match against Burnley away from home, they're a much better team at Turf Moor, particularly in defense, but also their offense scores more at Turf Moor. So I'm not afraid of Burnley. I think Jagielka and Stones can give Ings a fair share of trouble. So with Howard coming in at a mere £5.6 million, I think he's going to be fairly popular. You see a lot of managers try to get a keeper that they think could potentially keep a clean sheet and get one as cheap as possible. We saw Sirigu earlier in Champions League, which didn't work out, but most of my opponents had Sirigu, and that allowed them to reach for players like Luis Suarez. So I saw some people that had Sirigu and Suarez, and you know what? It worked out. Sirigu didn't play well, but Suarez did. So you kind of think of all the dominoes that fall based on a decision you make. So oftentimes it's good to save money, get a good value. at keeper and defense, and hope that you pick the right attackers. My differential this week, I've got Julian Speroni, Crystal Palace. They are hosting West Brom at Selhurst Park. Palace has been pretty good since Pardue came. Speroni in particular has played solidly. I don't think too many managers will be on him because despite being the early match, we're looking at getting the first the first 4 matches, I believe, we'll have lineups for before we go into lock. So I think that, given the option, I think people will reach for Howard, save a little bit of their budget, or they'll go with Hart or maybe Kelvin Davis. I think those are the 4 options this week that most managers will end up on. I do think Speroni will probably be the least owned of those 4, so that makes him a differential. But he's pretty similar to the other options, and I wouldn't run away from him by any means. At defender, I'm going to start out with Leighton Baines. He's been a bit of a disappointment this season due to his injuries. He started out, he was a near must-play defender. If you didn't have him on some of your rosters in your lineups, you weren't going to win. Nowadays, he's not doing a whole lot, but I have a good feeling about him this week. Burnley is not going to keep a whole lot of possession away from home. He may be going up against Trippier, which could keep him back a little bit, but I think more likely Everton is going to be able to dominate possession, and it's not like Trippier is a particularly good defender, so it's as big a problem for him to have to stay back against Baines as it would be for Baines to have to stay back against Trippier. So I like Baines a lot. He's a little bit expensive at £10.3 million. Seamus Coleman is also a good option, £8.3 million. I can imagine there's going to be a lot of teams that have both of those players just because they're such good attacking options and they have a really solid chance at a clean sheet. My next defender, I've got Pablo Zabaleta from Manchester City. Again, we're a little bit Jekyll and Hyde here with Manchester City this week, but I think Zabaleta is really solid. He's been getting forward a good bit. I was a little bit surprised to see that he is actually 3rd among defenders in the Premier League in touches in the opponent's final third. So that means he's getting forward, he's getting touches. This is a game that City, no matter what we think about their defense, whether they're going to let up a goal or not, they're going to score a fair share of goals, and they're probably not feeling so hot after their defeat against United. I think City could put up 3 or 4 goals fairly easily, and you're going to find a good number of their players in my lineups. But that's going to include defenders too, because I think that they're going to have good opportunities to get forward, and I do think that they're 50-50 to keep a clean sheet, and that's about as good as you can expect in the Premier League with the ability of all the lower table teams. Next, I've got Ryan Bertrand. He wasn't great last week. I thought that after seeing that Klein was not in the starting lineup, I thought Bertrand would get a lot more touches, be responsible for sending in crosses, but it didn't really happen. Still kept a clean sheet, so he still was just fine in terms of his value. Wasn't really making you a whole lot of money, but shouldn't have lost you any money either. I think Klein will be back in the starting lineup, but I liked Southampton quite a bit against Stoke. Stoke, obviously they lost Bojan earlier, and now they've lost Victor Moses again. And when they don't have Victor Moses, I feel like they lose considerable amount of their attacking threat. I don't know that they have the goods to bring the ball from the back to their forwards. Diouf is a pretty good player. He can definitely be a threat, but beyond that, I don't expect Stoke to do a whole lot, which makes Bertrand attractive to me. Next, I've got Martin Demichelis. Manchester City should be playing center back. He's at only 5.8 million pounds, and I think most of that is because he's got a bit of a fouling problem. He also completes a lot of passes, though, so those should offset in Mondogoal's scoring. The chances at a clean sheet really, clean sheet plus playing 90 minutes, he would get 5.8 points right there. So, at 5.8 million pounds, he's paid for himself already. So I think DeMcKillis is a really solid play. I think he'll be popular, assuming he's in the lineup. We won't know that on Saturday, but I think Mangala will come into the lineup. I can't imagine DeMcKillis would not play. But our differential at defense is a player that we bring up really often, almost as often as Graziano Pella, and that is Jeffrey Schlupp from Leicester. We've gone over this a few times. He's a forward that is listed as a defender on Mondogoal, and he's a pretty solid attacker, and Leicester has a good chance to score goals. So this is almost a perfect storm. We've taken a Leicester before when we thought they've had a chance at a clean sheet, but rarely do they have a chance at a clean sheet and also have a chance to score goals. And I do think that that's a possibility this week. The last two matches I've I don't want to make anybody jealous over there, but in the U.S., I can watch all the Premier League games that are on at 3 p.m. UK time all at once, and I can choose which games I want to watch. And frankly, I've been turning over to Leicester matches the last 2 weeks just because they're playing recklessly. They're playing exceptionally well. They're a lot of fun to watch right now. That last-minute goal last week was really exciting. And, I was kind of rooting for them to go down just because they don't have any real standout offensive players. They're not particularly exciting, but they've kind of changed my mind the past 2 weeks. So I could live with Leicester if they do it like this, and they go from almost a certain death to knocking on the door of staying up. So Schlupp, 7.8 million pounds. Hopefully get a couple shots on goals. He gets credit for his tackles won, which he does pretty well because he's a defender. And I don't think he'll get a clean sheet, but I think I think he could maybe let up just one goal. More likely, we're looking at another 3-2 match, one direction. But we're not too concerned about the clean sheet when we can get a forward to play back at defender and basically get a fourth forward in there if you're choosing to select three otherwise. Moving on to midfield. The first choice that I think we're going to be putting in our lineups in midfield is going to be David Silva. He's not particularly cheap at 14.4 million pounds, but as I mentioned, they're going to score goals. And I think if you look at the matches where City is really effective in their attack, Silva's a huge part of that. He's going to provide service for Aguero. He'll probably lay off a couple passes for Torre. I think Silva at that value is going to be really strong. 14.4 million is not inexpensive, but he's probably more of a 16 or 17 million pound type player in a match like this. So you're getting a little bit of a discount there, and I think that the budget this week is reasonable enough to try to squeeze him in. Next, I've got Gylfi Sigurdsson facing the aforementioned Leicester City. It's an away match. Bonnie's gone. Gomis is now gone as well. Sounds like he may be done for this season. So Sigurdsson's going to be relied on to attack a bit more, and he's capable of doing that. He's done it before. He's got to be a little bit more aggressive. But against Leicester, I think the opportunities are going to be there. There's going to be a lot of counterattacking opportunities, and Leicester's just not particularly stout as a defense. Though the odds makers do give them a little bit better chance of a clean sheet and expect them to score, which is mildly surprising. But I still like Sigurdsson. I think he can score Mondogoal points even without a goal or an assist. So he's one of those players that's a little bit safer. He'll draw some fouls and he'll be involved in the attack. So I like Sigurdsson this week. Next, I've got Yannick Bolasie from Crystal Palace. His value is up to 10.4 million pounds. thing tends to happen when you score a hat trick. I do think he's going to be very popular this week, which makes me a little bit less excited to use him because he's not exactly the most consistent player out there. But they've got West Brom. West Brom is fairly erratic. They they haven't been as good at defense as Pulis would lead you to believe they should be. And now they're going away to Selhurst Park, and I think that Palace is going to be able to score. I think this is going to be a pretty exciting match. Christian Eriksen is my next midfielder. He's £9.7 million. They are away at St. James Park. And Eriksen has been a little bit slow lately, not as effective as he was earlier in the season when he was scoring goals and really being a big playmaker. But he can play with Kane, no problem. And I don't think Newcastle is very good right now. They may have quit on Carver a little bit. And particularly their problems are in defense. Well, their problems are all over the field. So, but I don't think you're going to see Carver stick around. I think they've kind of bailed on him, and I think that that's going to mean that Tottenham and Pochettino are going to be able to break holes in them, and Eriksen is going to be one of the players involved in doing that. My midfielder is also from Crystal Palace as my differential, and that would be Jason Punchin, who has been a star. He's been an absolute star since Pardew took over, and I think with Balassi playing so well, with Glenn Murray scoring goals up top, that people may overlook Punchin a little bit, but there's no reason to believe that he couldn't do everything that Balassi did last week, and he's done similar things before. Getting a goal and a couple of assists when he's taking set piece duty. West Brom is fine, but I think Palace should be able to score, and I think Punchin can be involved in that. Moving on to forward, the aforementioned Harry Kane from the Spurs, also away at St. James Park against Newcastle. Kane has been really poor the past 2 weeks, which has been a surprise after his performance all year has been outstanding, and then he is ineffective away at Turf Moor against Burnley, and then ineffective in a home match against Villa. When you look at the Premier League, those are two teams that are near the bottom of the table, and they're okay defenses, but they're not good defensive. And when you look at a player like Kane, he should be capable of scoring on them in his sleep. So, bit of a concern. Maybe he's a little worn down as the season's gone along. He's young. Maybe he's not quite equipped for the travel schedule and the packed in fixtures. But that aside, he's had some rest. Tottenham's obviously long out of Europa. No more cup play for them in any fashion. So he's had a full week off, and I think that's going to lead to some fresher legs. And I think Tottenham is going to score 2 or 3 goals against Newcastle. And when that happens, Kane's typically involved. Next, we have Sergio Aguero, £13.5 million. I would have recommended him this week without him scoring the past 2 weeks. So it's a little less exciting knowing that he's going to be very, very highly owned, if not near 100% owned. His value is just not expensive enough to really consider fading him, especially when we have 11 spots to fill. I'm just not going to pass on him at $13.5 million. If he was $18 million, it would be a conversation. I'd still think I might take him, knowing that he could score two or three goals fairly easily against West Ham. West Ham is just in shambles these days. So I would say that no matter what type of league you're in, what type of contest you're in, you probably need to find room for Sergio Aguero. Next, I have a favorite of the fantasy football backers, and that's Graziano Pella. We've mentioned him virtually every week. He's certainly burned me. a few times, but just the sheer amount of touches he gets and the chances that Southampton's capable of creating, he's a solid striker, and he found the net last week. I think that's going to give him some confidence. He's away at Stoke is not a great matchup, but his value hasn't really gone up much despite the goal last week. So I think that he's a solid pick. £7.3 million. If you're not really into Pella, and I know that a lot of other managers are not, seeing as I was pretty much alone on him last week, but David Nugent is an interesting option at £6.8 million. We mentioned Leicester and their attacking opportunities with Schlupp. Nugent has been pretty solid. He's a little bit of an up and down player, though. He's inconsistent. If he gets a goal, he's going to be worth well over his value. If he doesn't score, he might get a few fouls and might end up around 0, 1, 2 points, which isn't really going to cut it at $6.8 million for his value. So, Nugent's a little bit of a risk. Most strikers are a bit of a risk. They've got to score. They've got to at least get a couple shots on target to justify, because they're not going to get a clean sheet bonus. They're likely not going to get as many completed passes, and it's a little tougher for strikers. But when they hit, they can really hit, and that's why we want to be careful about who we choose and make sure we're using our budget wisely with our strikers. Which leads me to my differential, which I think could be very interesting this week, because I think he will be virtually unowned, and that's Romelu Lukaku from Everton. Picked up an injury a few weeks ago. He hasn't played in a few matches. He had been absolutely on fire, in perfect form in Europa, scoring 1 or 2 goals against his opponents there in group stages, and then even in knockout. You have to wonder if the injury will hold him up, whether he'll be able to play 90, but I don't know that Burnley's going to hold him up. Burnley is a fairly weak side away from Turf Moor. Lukaku is clearly the top goal scorer for Everton, and this is a match they should be able to score in. So at £13.5 million, he's the same price as Aguero. Nobody in their right mind would choose Lukaku over Aguero. You might want to choose Lukaku over Kane, though. Depending on what type of contest you're in, I think Lukaku could be fairly interesting. He's got a good chance at scoring a goal, and he's a solid striker. So, assuming that he's back fit and he's going to be able to go, at least a solid 75 minutes, I think Lukaku could be interesting. I still list him as a differential because I do think that Aguero is a much better option. Silva in the midfield is another place you can spend some of your money. So, you may not have to reach for Lukaku, but if you do, I think he could potentially really pay off. So, that's a wrap for Fantasy Football Backers. Again, this is Devo 1099 heading into Premier League Game Week 33. We're going to have some fun this week, despite the abbreviated schedule of just 7 matches. You've got Chelsea and United, which I didn't even bring up. It's hard to predict that one. That's going to be a great one to watch, but I don't really love that from a fantasy standpoint. A lot of the Chelsea players are expensive. A lot of the United players are expensive. So I'm going to sit back and watch that one. I'm going to hope the rest of my team can do the job in the early matches, and I can sit and watch that one and not have people catching me from behind. So best of luck to you. Get on Mondogoal. If you got any questions, we've got our forum open. We're trying to answer those questions as quickly as possible, trying to build a community and really get everybody involved in daily fantasy football, because we think it's going to take off here sooner than later. And come next season in August, I think we're going to start seeing a big marketing blitz from Mondogoal, from some of these other providers, and hopefully catching up to how popular it is in the States here. So best of luck. Really hoping for a great Game Week 33, and we'll see you again next week.